I don't see it here. I've refreshed your page a few times. Maybe my computer's just slow, but we'll see.
Let me pull up the. Let me make sure the sound going here. So I don't want it to happen like last time.
Right, yeah. It's good that we checked that last time.
I
No,
think
I
there
still
might
don't
not
see
be
it on your...
sound. Oh no, I see that the sound meter is like moving up and down. You still don't see it yet? Let me check the YouTube page here.
Okay.
YouTube page shows live for about 30 seconds.
Okay. Maybe my computer's just slow.
Well, it could be there's a delay. It might take a minute before it pops up. Because I don't know if it starts right away live or if it's buffered for like a minute or so.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes it takes a minute.
Yeah, because most of the stuff I was posting in about your podcast weren't really arguments; they were just questions.
Yeah.
Like I would have to revisit Dr. Corey and see who he talks about as, because like I said, Corey's a practitioner who deals directly with patients. So many things he will see personally, of course, are anecdotal, and
that's the guy. That's the guy who was on Brett Weinstein's podcast and then went with him on Joe Rogan's podcast, right?
Right. He was on Rogan, and I imagine has the best intentions about what he's doing. However, if he needs that data to be analyzed, I'm not sure if he or Brett Weinstein are the people to do that. Like, I would rather him defer to someone who does that professionally. That's their livelihood. That's what they do.
And that's analyze. You said that doctor who
was on the head of medical research.
He's the guy who was on Sam Harris's podcast, right?
Yeah, he's like a legitimate medical researcher who heads a medical research department at a university. He's not a practitioner. Like, all they do is look at studies and things of that nature. So he has to know the ins and outs on how studies work, what things are looked at to determine if something is effective. And I don't remember like the gist of what he said, but from what I remember, he said that more needs to be done and there needs to be more rigorous study, not to go off of what's current, but to go ahead and pursue more rigorous study of the impacts of that particular drug for COVID. He's not saying that ivermectin is a bunk thing to proceed with. He's just saying that the data is not there yet. Whereas someone like Dr. Corey is saying that the data is there. Right. Which is, I don't know, if Corey has another medical researcher that's in his camp that confirms this stuff, then I'd be more than happy to look at that. It's just, what someone specializes in is very important to weigh, the data that they're telling you. Like, if you're going to go to a doctor's office and you got a problem with your tooth, are you going to see like your general practitioner or are you going to see a dentist? Like, they're both medical practitioners, just one is a specialist in teeth. Like, your doctor would be able to probably determine a couple of things, but they wouldn't have the training to really delve deep into solving a problem that stems from, a dental issue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's an important point too, because they're, like you pointed out, the first guy who is like sort of on Brett Weinstein's side of the argument, he sees individual patients, and then the guy who's on Sam Harris' podcast actually studies medical analyses, and then people are believe it, like basically believing whichever doctors agree with them in
Right.
general about this whole thing. Like, this doctor says this, so that means it's true. Those other doctors are wrong, and they could be any kind of medical doctor, but they don't necessarily have the specialty that actually examines these specific things. And that's one of the criticisms that people of Brett Weinstein too, which is that he's a biologist. He's not a medical doctor of any kind.
Right. Like I understand that he has, academic training in biology, but
Looks like the stream's working now, by the way. I saw that.
Okay. But yeah, man, I would like to hear it from a specialist in the field. Like I understand Corey's concern, but if you really want to move this forward, you're really going to get some legitimate people working on it, and you can't be an alarmist and say we have the answers already, because that's the problem I think is going on there, is that in the Weinstein and Corey camp, they're saying that they have the answers, but the problem is they really don't, and further study is needed. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying that there should be more study about this. Because they're talking about, oh, we need to immediately implement this drug, and there's not. All the studies prove this and this and this, but it's
anytime anyone says all the studies say this or that, they're definitely wrong, because all the studies never say anything in science. There's never like 100% consensus. There's not even 100% consensus on climate change. It's like 90% or something like that, which is phenomenally high for a scientific consensus.
Right. So, yeah, that would be a nice thing to talk about. Like, I understand, like, the aversion to mandates and things like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing too, because I suggested to Chris, and he agreed, that we're going to do a podcast about the fact that a Canadian federal election was just called. So we're going to do a podcast about the candidates and their platforms. And I've been reading a little bit about their different policies, and like it seems like basically all of the party leaders want there to be like vaccine passports for international travel and mandatory vaccinations for government employees. And there's just basically variation in terms of the severity of that. Like, the conservative guy wants there to also be the option of people staying home from work and getting paid leave. So, I mean, that's an interesting issue too, because in general, I don't like the idea of things like mask mandates and vaccine passports and shit like that. But for international travel, I think that makes more sense. But I don't it would be a hell of a lot worse if it were like mandatory vaccinations for all Canadian citizens or something like that. But I don't like the idea of government employees being required to do that either. And like I always try to remember to say, as Chris pointed out yesterday, I have been vaccinated, so I'm not like an anti-vaxxer. That's just like it'll be interesting. Chris and I will get into more detail about that, because that's actually one of the few issues that I disagree with on like the NDP party, which, even though that I hate their rhetoric, because they're so fucked, like the leader Jagmeet Singh is so fucking woke in his rhetoric, it annoys the hell out of me. And I don't agree with all of his policies, but I agree with more of his policies so far anyway than other candidates, which is like, I usually just usually comes down to the candidate I disagree with the least when I decide who I'm voting for.
Well, I think when it comes to like the mandate stuff, like especially with the vaccine, I think you should really give an option to people who don't want to get the vaccine.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And we have that option. It's called COVID testing. So if they're not sick and you want to test them regularly and they're not positive, then that's fine. But I think you should probably even test people who've gotten a vaccine. I know there are breakthrough cases, right, that happen. So maybe everyone should just get regularly tested.
That might be a good idea too. Yeah, I forgot that you just reminded me the conservative guy said that too. And then, like, this is another example of how, in my opinion, to me at least, all politicians are a mixed bag. Like the one of the reasons that I don't think I would want to vote for the conservative candidate is a similar reason to the reason I didn't vote for the Conservative Party candidate in the last election, which is that in the last election, the conservative guy wanted to cut maternity leave, and in this election, the conservative guy wants to cut childcare. And I know from people I know who have to put their children in daycare because they both work full time, then it's like fucking $2,000 a month, shit like that. And he wants to replace that with child tax credits, which I think that's a good idea too. But he also said for something like only $4,000 or $6,000, and he didn't say over what time frame. So if that's like the total amount, that barely scratches the surface of how much people have to pay every month for childcare.
Yeah, like I scheduled my work around not having to pay for childcare because childcare is definitely expensive. It's like paying rent, basically.
Yeah, or a mortgage. Yeah.
Right. So I wanted to avoid that cost at all costs. So I did so by basically scheduling my life around not having to ever employ anyone for childcare. I just got lucky in that way, and I know not everybody can do that. But hey, childcare is very expensive.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like other politicians want to focus more specifically on like reducing childcare costs, which makes more sense to me. But yeah, this is totally unrelated to what we were going to talk about, right?
Right. So we're going to talk about another one of Terry Goodkind's books, and it is The Stone of Tears, which is book 2 in the Sword of Truth series. So I am the Woke Centrist, aka Dusty Cubes, and we got Andrew Meintzer, aka Mr. Mindgasms here, and I believe you just probably recently finished this, right?
Yeah, I just finished it earlier today.
Okay, so yeah, we're not going to do a super deep dive like I do with Wheel of Time here. We're just going to kind of talk about the general book, how it may have improved or not improved, but I actually think this book is an improvement in every way from the first.
Yeah, me too.
In this book, they separated, because there's essentially 3 points of view in this book, right?
Yeah.
We have, of course, Richard, we have Kaelin, and we have Zed, and they all get separated and they're all gone kind of their own adventure here in this book. So, I know the book basically starts off with plans for Richard and Kaelin to get married, right? And they go back to the Mud People, and I have to also say this book is pretty damn long. Did you read it or did you listen to it?
I listened to it this time.
Okay. It's a long ass book. So In the beginning,
I think the audiobook's like around 37 hours in total.
yeah, it's pretty long. So, in the beginning of this book, Richard is back in the Mud People country, and he is he's an honorary Mud person, I guess, and he wants to honor their traditions, so he's going to go and get married the Mud person way. While he's down here in Mud People country, there is one Mud person who particularly doesn't like him, and that's because in the last book we had Kaelin actually killed that elder, and I think the name of the guy starts with a C, but I forgot his name. But this guy, doesn't like Richard, and he's kind of always challenging him. And in one case, they challenge him in an archery contest or hunting contest to see how good of an archer he is. And apparently, when they challenge him, he has a superhuman arching ability. So what happens is they come back. I think his name is Chandlin, right?
I think so. I don't remember for sure.
Yeah, Chandlin's pissed off because Richard had actually shot him, but the arrow went through him and hit an assassin behind him. So they're debating over whether Richard is trying to kill him or Richard was trying to save him. So
right.
While Richard explains the situation and the tribesmen explain, we basically come to see that Richard has some type of superhuman arching ability that just seems very abnormal. So they explain that he is like ridiculously accurate. He can split arrows, and not only can he just split arrows, if someone fires an arrow at him, he could split them that way, or he can catch them with his bare hands.
Exactly.
So he explains like, I make it appear like the targets are closer. So they eventually figure out that he has the gift, and he's been getting these headaches as well. And they become more frequent, and eventually both Kaelin and him come to realize that these headaches are going to kill him. Like, they're that bad. So, during this time, 3 Aes Sedai show up in the village. Oh, did I say Aes Sedai? I meant... I meant, what are they called? It's not Children of the Light, but Sisters of the Light.
Sisters of the Dark? Sisters of the Light, right? Yeah, later on is Sisters of the Dark. Yeah.
Oh, are you talking about the Dark Aja? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Basically the Black Aja, yeah.
So these Sisters of the Light have detected this ability, and they give him the lowdown, which is you come with us, we put this collar on you, and we'll make it so that you can control the gift, and the headaches won't kill you.
Right.
Richard is very much against this. He's like, hell no, I ain't going to do this shit. But let me just say something right before I get into that. Right at the beginning of the book, they get attacked by a monster.
Yeah, that's a cool monster.
So the monster is like super invincible, and it just laughs at everybody. But they eventually kill it. But after they kill the monster, they figure out that this monster was sent from the underworld. So there's this kind of overarching theme that there's this another force acting out, which we will eventually call the Keeper, which is basically the Dark One.
Yeah, exactly, right? Wait, guys, there is a bigger, badder bad guy.
Yeah, someone bigger and badder than Dark and Rolf. So back to
it's
where...
also Thanos.
Yeah,
Guess what, guys? Loki's not the real bad guy. It's Thanos.
Yeah, and there's some other bad guys later on that we can talk about too that get introduced as well. And it's kind of like it's kind of where we get our Terry Goodkind objectivism shot of politics later on that creates a bad guy. What were they called? Like the Imperial Order or something like that. This is such a long
The
book.
guy that speaks in a Russian accent is so hilarious.
So anyway, so these three sisters show up and they give him 3 chances to come with them, and every time he refuses, one of them commits suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, this is a really interesting aspect, I thought, because one thing I noticed in this book that, like you were saying, I agreed that this one I thought was like in the first one, like similarly to the first one. I think my favorite aspect of it is the world building and the backstory, and I think that aspect is also the best aspect of this one, and it's a whole lot better than it was in the first one too.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, there's a lot of character building and development in this one. Like, we get more of Kaelin's backstory.
Yeah,
we get
her part in this book is actually my favorite part of the whole book for sure. All of her chapters.
Yeah, hers is definitely the most interesting, I would say. Like, I didn't care for the magic school or anything like that. It was mostly like,
I thought that Richard's parts in it were actually the least interesting.
Me too. I totally agree. So anyway, on the third, Kaelin, wow. Kaelin coerces Richard into going with the Sister of the Light in a really interesting way. She, of course, is very much concerned with Richard's health. But before this, right before they talk to the third sister, they do a gathering again where they talk to the old spirits. And because there's a couple things that happen. They do a gathering and they talk to the old spirits. And what the old spirits are is you talk to your own ancestors. And guess what? We find Richard finally gets to see that his ancestor is in fact Dark and Raw.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. That's so interesting too, because he's like, Dark and Raw is his father, but Zed is his grandfather.
Right. And I know also when they're with the people, the mud people, Shoda the witch shows up, and she has a discussion with Kaelin, telling her that if you guys have a child, it's going to be a male confessor, and that's going to be a disaster of some sort.
Right.
So after the whole Dark and Raw thing, well, what happens during that interaction is he curses Richard. Deanna comes back as a spirit, takes that curse upon herself, and basically talks to Kaelin and admits to like all the torture and stuff that she did, but she also admits that she was like in love with them. Mm-hmm. And she's going to go ahead and sacrifice herself for Richard.
That's like one that specific thing was one of my least favorite aspects of this book. Like, it's like fucking cheesy classic James Bond in that every woman that Richard comes across is like instantly desperately in love with him and wants to fuck him right there now.
Right. So Richard, gets revived because she takes on the Keeper's mark or whatever. And going back, the three sisters, he agrees to go to one because Kaelin coerces Richard into doing it because she was also told that by Deanna that the headaches were going to kill him. So she was afraid that Richard was going to die. And so she was pretty desperate. And she used her own coercive way to conquer Richard's PTSD about having a collar around his neck.
Yeah.
Which I was kind
That's
of mad
interesting
at Richard too, because he knew what was going to happen the second time. He said no, and he still allowed like the chick to commit suicide. Well, in this instance, it wasn't her that she commit suicide because he blocked her from stabbing herself, but the remaining sister killed the one that was supposed to commit suicide.
Yeah. Well, that's like one aspect of Richard that is just dumb, that he's just so goddamn stubborn. He's way too attached to his principles.
Right. So he gets coerced. He's really pissed off. He's goes with the sister Verna and protest, and he's like really pissy about it. On his journey, he meets a Gar, and he has a Gar buddy as a friend. I thought it was really sad later on when he made the Gar go away. I was like, man, that's probably like the saddest part of the book.
That was sad. You know, that kind of reminded me of when Frodo sent Gollum away to supposedly protect him in The Lord of the Rings: Return of the King.
Mm-hmm. Like it was like it was basically it imprinted on him. So the guards basically saw Richard as his father, like a father figure. But anyway, they go on their journey. So now I want to go back to Kaelin, and Kaelin is going to go back to the seat of power for the Confessors. And on her way there, she's also taking Chandlin and two others as protectors. I also didn't mention that there's like some interesting conversations that they have. I think one of the ones I thought was kind of fucked up is that there was like a tribe that they had wiped out. And Chandlin had discussed that, and Kaelin was just kind of okay with that. So it's kind of like and when I say wiped out, not only did they kill the warriors, they killed the women and children. So Kaelin was okay with genocide. I was like, really? You're not going to say something about them killing the women and children too?
I know, right?
And then how can she be upset when she goes into that town, right? And there's a bunch of like dead bodies everywhere, women and children, and she gets totally upset. So there's a little hypocrisy there. I don't know. You know, hey, this is his second book. Maybe he's kind of building on his principles here, but
so it's hard to know how much of that is that, and how much of it is like deliberately making them unlikable characters, because it could be that too, because like you know, Robert Jordan is famously fucking fantastic at doing that, making unlikable characters.
Yeah, I guess you're talking about like Gawain and stuff, right?
Well, and just like how petty all the Supergirls are with each other in so many of the earlier books.
Oh, when they fight, they're like squabbling with each other. Yeah. I totally get that. Hey, it could be something like that too. Who knows? We're only in the second book here. So, along her travels, she comes across a town that's like completely sacked, raided, obliterated. You name it. It's pretty jacked. And she really wants to find out what happens. So she ends up catching up to an army, and the army is of the defenders of that former defenders of that town, and it just happens to be that everybody that's left alive in this little army is a bunch of teens, and these teens are way too cocky about their abilities.
What a shocker.
Like ridiculously cocky. And she tells them, you guys are pretty much idiots and you're going to go on a suicide mission here. So what she does is she scouts ahead forward and she finds the army, and she wants to try to have a diplomatic resolution, possibly. So she goes and she finds out about this army, and they call themselves the Imperial Order. And, you know, they're spouting a bunch of socialism and crap like that. You know, Terry Goodkind trying to create, like, socialism bad.
Yeah.
So eventually they attack her. She escapes. And then when she meets up with the teenagers, she's like, fuck this, we're gonna do guerrilla warfare on these bastards. And man, is Kaelin ruthless as fuck.
She's a badass, man. Is this supposed to be the part, or is that later on when she's like, okay, I'm going to command you, and I'm going to get naked, and we're going to all get naked and paint ourselves white, and then kill a bunch of motherfuckers?
That definitely happens after this, but she comes back to the teens, and she's telling them, this is guerrilla warfare. We're going to be ruthless as fuck here, you know. When I say ruthless, we're talking about like abandoning allies and shit like that on the battlefield. She just, like her attitude is win at any cost. Like kind of totally abandoning any moral principles. It's just guerrilla warfare, win at any cost. I get it. Like they're extremely outnumbered, outclassed, and she has to do whatever she can. Like, you know, run out naked and scare everybody to think that she's an evil spirit, you know, try to get the advantage there. So
that's actually a really smart tactic.
Right. And it throws them off. And then she does blunder from her principles, because there's a part during that where she thinks she kind of builds way too much confidence. And instead of retreating, she pushes in, and that causes some problems for her.
Right.
But eventually she is successful in killing their wizard, because one of their missions was, okay, if they have a wizard, they're going to see us coming no matter what.
Right.
So she actually kills the wizard. I did enjoy that little battle that she had with the wizard. And there's like
that part was
fireball that's like tracking her, and she's like riding around her horse, and this fireball is like hitting like other bystanders that are watching there's like enemy soldiers that are watching the battle. But it's quite good. Like all the Kaelin stuff is definitely a highlight. So sure. I haven't talked about our third POV, which is Zed.
His is really interesting too.
Yeah, and it's interesting when we talk about, I would say, the witch woman. Her name is Ada, right? Is that her name? Ada or Addie?
I think it's Addie. Yeah.
Addie,
yeah,
right.
I remember because I was just finishing Last of Kings today too, and exactly. There's similar Artie and Addie. Yeah.
Okay, so we get a lot of backstory about her in particular. So basically, Zed and Artie are basically shacked up, you know, magical people, old people that are boning each other, whatever, who enjoy each other's company. So Zed goes and meets with Artie, and they talk about the veil, right? The thing that separates the underworld. And I think it was Zed who is
Or
investigating the
Kella
weakening.
Riyadh.
No, the veil, the underworld is like hell, I guess, right?
Right.
So, because of the attack, he's trying to investigate. And when I say the attack, we're talking about the creature that attacked right in the beginning. That would have to have gone through the underworld in order to get to them. And he's trying to investigate. So he goes to Artie. And there's like this creature. I think she does like some type of soothsaying. And during that, some creature comes to life, like a skeleton. Like some creature's bones come to life and they fight with this creature. And this creature injures Addie. And they flee her house. They don't like stay there and defeat it. They flee the house and she's injured and he needs to get her medical attention, but his abilities aren't quite good enough to heal her, right?
Right.
Eventually they go traveling, and eventually he tells her that we really need to talk to like the witch women that taught you your thing, because maybe they know something about how to fix this. And he admits to her eventually that him keeping her alive through his magic, he has internalized what is ailing her, which means not only is she going to die, he's also going to die too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I know on their journey, eventually he hires like this dude to chauffeur them to the place that they need to go. And they go under assumed names, but eventually he trusts them enough to give them their true identities. But what ends up happening is, in order for them to recover from this corruption that's taking over their bodies, they must completely have their memories erased. And it is uncertain in the amount of time when they'll get, if or when they'll get their memories back. So they don't know, but that's the only thing that they can do to survive. So they do it and they get their memories erased. And going back, because one of the things I want to mention too is there's actually one more quick POV that I want to talk about that's pretty crazy. And it's only like a couple chapters, but the POV is about one of these sisters of the light who's investigating the Black Aja. And she eventually she follows one of the Black Aja in the forest, and she witnesses them having demon sex with like a demon. I was like, okay. Yeah, they're having sex with like a goat demon out in the middle of the woods.
I forgot about that part.
You remember it now, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
And it was pretty graphic. Like, I remember they described like the goat demon's penis as like having like spikes on it, if I'm not mistaken. So, and I think one of the conditions of her getting the power from the goat demon was it that she
the
couldn't...
goat demon's magical spiked penis.
Yeah, so in order to gain power from the goat demon, she had to coax the goat demon to screw her with the penis. It's not like the goat demon was there to rape. She had to invite the goat demon to cream pie her with the magical juice. So after the Sister of the Light witnesses this demonic I don't know, goat sex ritual. She is discovered, and she finds out that I guess her boyfriend is part of this cult named Jedediah. He's like one of the wizards there.
Right.
And Jedediah ends up like cutting her in half and stuff. And basically that whole section of the whole chapter is just to establish that Jedediah is a bad guy. That's what the whole chapter is about. That and
basically,
Goodkind wanting to write a scene about demon sex. Bestiality.
Yeah.
So, okay, going back to the other POVs. Richard goes to magical wizard school. And I guess one of the he gets assigned a Sister of Light who wants to jump his bones, pretty much.
Yep, like every woman.
And Richard is like, no, I'm in love with Kaelin. But yeah, the whole kind of magical school chapter or storyline wasn't particularly interesting. The things that were interesting were he met one of his ancestors, a living ancestor there.
Mm-hmm.
And his name was Nathan, and he was a prophet that was also under the watch of these sisters.
And he wrote the book that Richard memorized, that Zed got him to memorize, right?
Right, the Book of Counted Shadows. So we get to find out more about his guardian, Richard Cipher, who was allowed to smuggle this book out. And Nathan also explained the extent of Richard's powers. And we find out through Nathan that Richard is a very rare mage called a war mage. Is that what it's called? A war wizard.
Yeah. So he can use additive and subtractive magic.
Yeah, so his great grandfather lets him know that he's one of these rare war mages, and we haven't seen one for 3,000 years or so.
Right.
So there's a lot of political, I guess, intrigue going on at this little school, and there's kind of a battle between the Sisters of the Light and this secretive group that seems to be killing off wizards, storing their power inside of an Angreal, and
basically,
and transferring this power to the Black Sisters through this demon sex ritual, right?
Right.
And then this girl that likes him. That's like the boring stuff. So going back to Kaelin, which is like the real interesting stuff. So she gets back to, I think it's Arendelle. I don't remember quite the name of like the Confessor Seat of Power, but she arrives there and she finds out that, first, I know there was like some dude who took a dump on her bed. Do you remember that part? I don't know if he took a dump on her bed or he peed on it.
No, I didn't remember that part.
Yeah, she went home and then she was going to her room and like a prince of some other nation like peed and crapped on her bed, and then she ordered her servants to burn the sheets and blankets.
That's another one I remember now that you mention him.
Okay, so because this is important, because I think the next day she has like some type of council meeting and they find the dead body of the dude that had done that.
Right.
And she goes on trial, right? So she goes on trial. She gets, I think it's pretty much a sham trial. And they coerce basically all the witnesses to testify against Kaelin. saying that she had murdered that guy. So they lock her up and they throw her, I guess, in a cell with a bunch of rapists. And
Yeah, this is a fucking like intense part, man.
yeah, because we're like, as a reader, you're thinking, what the hell's gonna happen here? Like,
Fuck, she's about to get raped. I don't want her to get raped. Don't get raped. And then she comes really goddamn motherfucking close to getting raped.
Yeah,
But
she
just barely.
manipulates them.
Yeah.
And it is thought that I think what happens is they believe she doesn't have her confessor powers. So
Yeah, she got like tricked into it, or someone put a spell on her that made her believe that she doesn't have them anymore or something like that.
I think they put like a device on her or something like that. All I know is that at that point, she was unable to use her powers.
Right.
I forgot exactly why, but it had something to do with them putting some type of device that limited her powers, or putting a spell on her that did something to stop her from using her confessor powers. But anyway, she manipulates them, and then she's able to force her powers back, and she ends up, I think she takes like one of the most biggest and violent of the rapists, and she uses her powers on him, and he ends up killing all the other rapists, and she escapes.
Yeah, that was a fucking intense part because he came so close to raping her, and then she got her power back at the last moment and was able to use her powers to control him and get him to kill all the other guys, basically.
Right. And then we have a convergence of Kaelin's path and Zed's path. Because Kaelin ends up running into Zed, but she actually runs into I guess it's like a merchant who has been chauffeuring them around. And Kaelin tries to talk to Zed, and they have no idea who she is. And he explains that, they don't have any memory of their past lives, and basically tells her the story of what's going on with them. So one thing that Kaelin mentions is that Richard was taken by the Sisters of the Light, and this snaps Zed back into Zed, and he gets uncharacteristically mad. I think he backhands Kaelin, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he starts beating her up.
Yeah, so I was like, dude, what the fuck? What's going on with you, Zed? That's what I was thinking. So after this, he gets super pissed off, and he basically takes her back in custody to have her head chopped off for being a traitor, because she's a fugitive, and Zed is so mad that he wants to take her into custody and have her head chopped off for sending his grandson to the Sisters of the Light. So if we flip back to Richard, one thing we find out while Richard is at this compound is that in this castle, or whatever this place is, time moves differently. And he's told that, oh yeah, over here it might be a day, but out in the real world, we might have 2 weeks pass by. So he completely freaks out, because while he talks to Nathan, he also is given a prophecy about Kaelin, and that in order for things to move forward, Kaelin needs to die. So he wants to bust out of this place and save Kaelin. And he's trying to find any way that he can to do this. One of the ways he does this is he uncovers the plot, right, of the Black Aja by finally talking to, I guess, the Armelin of the school or whatever. He talks to the Armelin because the Armelin has like some magical door, and you can only get past it if you have like the will to do it or something like that, something ridiculous. And she explains that there are like Dark Aja and blah 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 blah. So eventually he uncovers this plot by going out into the forest, and then he comes across like the Black Aja doing the ritual. One thing he does while in the forest, I think he kills like a creature that nobody has killed before, and everybody's amazed by this. And I think he takes something from the creature that has like magical properties or something. But anyway, while he's out in the forest, he does battle with like one of the Black Aja, and what do they call them? Baneless, or like the ones who are being controlled by the keeper? Banelings?
I don't remember. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he fights one of those Banelings, who's basically one of the Black Aja. He wins. And I think it's the sister that brought him starts to feel very bad and actually wants to help him. So she assists him to get out of this place. And I think that girl who's in love with him dies, right?
I think so. What's her name?
I forget her name, but I know she gets killed. Shoot. Like, there's a bunch of stupid little things that happen at the school. Like, some dude wears Richard's cloak and he gets assassinated, and there's that's, like I said, this is not the most interesting part of the book.
Yeah.
But a large part of the book does occupy this. I guess there's another interesting part in Richard where he kills 30 people in a sword duel.
Right.
And
that part is pretty
kills
cool.
These 30 people, the leader like automatically gets married to him. So it's another thing where, every woman that he meets is either falls in love with him or becomes like a love interest or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, he killed 30 people, 30 sword masters. So anyway, he does have to travel back to try to prevent Kaelin from getting killed. And on the way back, he goes, because I think the issue with this journey into the area that they're at is that it's kind of like a one-way trip, and it's extremely difficult to traverse back. I think he ends up destroying like the mechanism that does that, which are like these towers, if I'm not mistaken, that kind of...
I think you're right. Yeah.
There's just like this weird trippy part before he gets to the school, and they go through this area where they basically go through a Tel'aran'rhiod-like experience, right? Do you remember this part when they're traveling and they get stuck in like this dream world, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that, where he talks to Dream Kaelin.
Yeah, so they kind of go back through there, and he destroys the mechanism that does that. And then he does eventually get over back to that city where Kaelin was at. And from all intents and purposes, he talks to Kaelin's maid, and she's like, oh no, she was killed. She was executed. And then we almost get into like a Romeo and Juliet plot here almost.
Yeah, pretty
where
much.
Richard's like on the verge of committing suicide. Until
Yeah, because he thinks that she's dead. That's the part when he thinks that she's dead?
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Like, everybody tells her that she's dead.
And what really happens turns out to be really interesting, I think.
Interesting and weird. Because I was like, so, he runs into Zed, right? So
yeah.
Zed explains that he had to do some type of magic that made everybody think that Kaelin was dead.
Mm-hmm.
But she wasn't dead.
So he had to fake her death so that they would believe she was dead so that they wouldn't go looking for her.
Right. I still don't know how it explains his crazy maniacal outburst from earlier.
I think that like he was being magically controlled by someone or something like that. Like he was being compelled.
I think his justification is that he had to believe it or something in order for the magic to actually happen.
Oh yeah, something like that.
Something like that, but
I don't remember exactly.
Anyway, yeah, Kaelin is not dead. She's alive. And there is one thing that they still need to do, because one thing I haven't mentioned is the Stone of Tears, that device.
Right.
Which all this time was around like the little girl's neck, and Chase, her adopted father, is also trying to look for Kaelin and Richard. But I don't, like, to be honest, did not understand the ending that well. What I
didn't really either.
Yeah, what I know what happens is the spirit of Darken Raw, I guess, takes one of these black sisters to the place where the boxes of Orden were opened. And one of the things I need to mention too is that the rip in the veil was caused by Richard.
Right.
Because he did not follow the proper procedures. And from what we learned is he failed at Wizard's second rule. And the Wizard's second rule has to do with unforeseen consequences.
Right.
Which is part of what the Veil Rip is about. So he was trying to defeat Darken Raw, but he didn't know that he actually made things worse. And he also made things worse by calling the Ancestors, which drew Darken Wall to the world so he can act on it. So at the end of this book, Darken Raw is back at it again. I think he's trying to do something to summon the Keeper or to break the veil or something like that. He's back at the People's Palace, and he's trying to utilize that Sorcerer's Sand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is
this is another part that just reminds me of like Baal-Zaman in the first 3 Wheel of Time books. Like, he's the bad guy. He's totally the main bad guy, right? He really is. Oh, he's back again. Oh, I guess gotta kill him again. Oh, eventually there's a worse bad guy that'll have to be confronted for sure, though.
Right. So I can't explain the ending because it confused me a bit. What I do know is the ritual got disrupted, and in order to keep the Keeper at bay, he had to throw the Stone of Tears into the underworld or something like that. But yeah, the ending was totally confusing to me, but I still think overall this was a much better book than the first one. Like, the middle was pretty grim darkish. Like, especially Kaelin's story was pretty grim darkish. Like, she went through hell.
Yep.
Richard did not go through hell. Whatever he thinks, he was whinging and whining over the collar and all that. Even after he was on his way, it was like, oh, Kaelin hates me. I'm going to throw away the lock of hair she gave me. Oh, no. He was kind of being pissy and whiny boy, while
Yeah.
Kaelin is like leading armies and doing battle. And we got this bitch Richard, like, oh, I am the bringer of death, and I'm gonna go to this school where we're all pampered as fuck because we give all the novice like all of the novice wizards get all the money they fucking want. So I'm just gonna go out and bribe all the guards and set up an entire brothel for them so I can do whatever I want. It's like, wow, Richard, really? You're having like the easiest time here out of everybody, including Zed. And I don't know. His path in this book was, okay, here's Richard being stubborn. Like, come on. It's like, okay, we know you're stubborn, but Jesus. But I really liked Kaelin's story. We got into her backstory. We got into why she's an effective battle leader. It's because her father was a general of renown and was taught, he schooled her on all battle tactics and everything. And if we remember right, her father was under the power of confession by her mother. So there was kind of this interesting rivalry between her and her half-sister, right? Because Kaelin's half-sister was the queen of a country. And there was a bit of animosity between Kaelin and her half-sister because her mother changed her father with the power of confession.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting too.
Yeah, so there was some interesting family dynamics that were going on. And did her sister survive?
I think so. I really don't remember, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't remember either, because I don't think she did, because when she went back to that city or whatever, she was basically in charge. I think they couldn't find her or something like that. I don't remember. That book is so freaking long. And
yeah, there's a hell of a lot that happens. It's like Wheel of Time level of stuff that happens in this book.
Yeah, and I actually was doing a little bit of research. I believe this is the longest of the books in this Sword of Truth series.
Oh, okay.
And then I was also doing research, and a lot of people that say that this is probably one of the better books in the series as well. But yeah, I think we forgot to mention of his Gar that he had to shoo away. Eventually, the Gar comes back, right? He meets the Gar again.
Yeah.
And they have a heartfelt reunion.
Yeah, that's nice. They hug it out.
Yeah, because the Gar was pretending to be a gargoyle, and he's like, he sees it moving. I was like, oh, that's what was the Gar's name? You listened to it, right? So whenever the Gar talked, it was like, rah, rah, like
yeah, it was like I don't remember. It was like rawr or some shit like that.
Yeah, it was basically like Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo's sidekick.
Yeah, Scooby-Doo's gargoyle sidekick.
What's his name made an appearance too, right? The Gollum-like character. He was briefly in this one.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that too.
Because he came with Shota, who was briefly in this one. But yeah, let's start ranking this one. What'd you think overall about this book?
Yeah, well, like I said, I like this one a lot more. So I think I gave the first one 3 stars. I gave this one 4 stars.
I don't remember what I gave this one in particular, but I know I gave it 1 more star than the first book.
I think you only gave the first one 2, didn't you? So maybe you gave this. Actually, you know, I might remember seeing recently that you gave it 3. Now that I think about it,
Yes, I think I did give it 3. I know I gave it 1 more than the previous book. I really like that they did some work on Kaelin. So right now, I definitely like Kaelin more as a character than Richard. Did this book make me like Richard more? No, it did not. I don't know. I just don't think that Richard is that interesting of a character.
I don't either. He's just like Luke Skywalker.
Right. So, I thought it was much better.
Yeah, Kaelin's my favorite character in this one, and Zed's part in it is really interesting too.
And I forgot to talk about the huge betrayal that occurred with Kaelin. So if we remember, Kaelin was traveling with 3 mud people.
Right.
We find out that one of the mud people was a baneling, and that mud person killed his brother and presumably killed Chandelin. And he was trying to capture and possibly rape Kaelin, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so.
And earlier in the story, he complimented like her breasts or something.
Yeah.
And she was trying
funny to inform aspect him of the cultural differences.
Yeah, and she was trying to inform him, you just don't do that. Yeah, that's not appropriate. So that same character, he is a baneling. He takes out his own brother, and he thought he took out Chandelin. Is it Chandelin that ends up coming back and killing him? The baneling?
I think it might be.
Yeah, I don't remember. There's so much stuff that happens.
Yeah.
I read this. I read this. I think it was like 3 weeks ago, maybe. You probably read it more recently, recently. I haven't. And the one thing I do remember is that one of the mud people is a baneling. I forgot. There was one interesting story with Ada too. Addie, that's her name. When she was talking about her backstory, there was an interesting thing about her fiance or lover or something like that, and they got captured, and he was tortured, and there was like a witch hunt going on, and they took him, and they wanted him to confess against her, and he didn't. Right? He stayed true to his guns.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think he got killed eventually, and then she wants to get revenge on. Is it the Blood of the Fold? Is that the name of that group? That's kind of like their witch hunters. Yeah,
that's the name of the next book.
Yeah, she wants to take revenge on them, and then one of them, I think she captures, and it ends up being that the one she captured and had tortured was a baneling, and his task was to actually capture him and torture him to turn her bad.
Right.
And he reveals himself that yes, he's accomplished his task, and his task was to turn her into a torturer.
Right.
So that's when we get kind of introduced to these banelings. But basically, banelings are dark friends. That's basically what they are. dark friends with a little extra powers, and they're a bit more psychotic. But there are so many parallels to like The Wheel of Time. It's not even funny, especially in this book.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Some people try to compare it to like Harry Potter. I didn't really think that the magic school aspect was very Harry Potter-ish to me. It didn't really seem that way. Like
No,
it seemed
didn't seem
like
that way.
yeah, to me it felt like, okay, this is the Red Aja, and we need to get control of these male wizards. So
Yeah.
we imprison them at this school until we think they're ready to go out in the world, which could be hundreds of years or never, because they
Yeah.
basically locked up his great-great-great-grandfather and never let him go.
Yeah.
So, better than the first book. I will give this thumbs up. This is not a bad book. It's pretty okay. It's pretty good. It's entertaining. There's some interesting, like, grim, darkish stuff that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple interesting twists and turns in there.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I would say so.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say so too. Like I said, I like the world building and the character development more, and there were a lot of really cool fights too, and like you said, some pretty interesting plot twists. And yeah, there were definitely some cheesy aspects, like the stuff with all those women falling all over Richard all the time, and kind of like the romance in general. I thought was kind of weak, especially towards the beginning of the story between Richard and Kaelin. But I think that like overall, it's pretty interesting. But it was really good, like it way better than I expected it to be. Yeah.
Do you remember that there is a part in the book where Kaelin fondles his genitals?
No, I didn't remember that part.
I
remembered someone doing that. I didn't remember that it was her. I thought it was one of those other women who were always like hitting him.
She did that to him in the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Before he went to magic school.
Yeah, in the beginning, she was all like, "Oh, you're so amazing! Oh, aren't you great? You're amazing! I love you so much! You're great! You're amazing!"
Yeah, Terry Goodkind doesn't write very good romantic stuff. I think that's just most fantasy, really, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like even thinking about First Law. Like the quote-unquote romance in there seems more realistic.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, the romance we see in this book is more an idealized version of romance. Mm-hmm. And I usually see that idealized version of romance in most things that portray romance.
Yeah.
Like ridiculous levels of romance. Like,
yeah.
So I was watching the show with my wife. It's like a Turkish, I don't know what you want to call it, like a Turkish drama or soap opera. It seemed to be pretty popular these days.
My parents watch a British soap opera. It's so cheesy.
Yeah, it's like one of those soap operas there's gangsters and well anyway, like the main character is like ridiculously romantic to a level that is not realistic, you know. Nobody fucking does that. Like I've never heard of one person in real life who's not like mega rich that would take this amount of time every day to be ridiculously romantic. And they set like these ridiculous standards.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. When I think of First Law, I think of, that's really how relationships work for the most part. Like these kind of gray, clumsy, not super idealized versions of relationships, and then we get that's seems
like
more
you don't really know what you're doing, and it takes you a while to figure out how you feel about someone. Basically, how it's portrayed in First Law.
Yeah, in this one, it's like, oh, our love is so great that it defeats magic. It's like,
yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
But I think overall, yeah, it's a much better book. There are some parts that were unexpectedly emotional. I guess I would say just I was really sad when he made the Gar go away.
Yeah, me too.
Because it was basically his only friend. Richard doesn't have many friends,
No.
And at that point, the Gar was the only friend he had because everybody else was out doing their thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and he was doing it for a noble cause, right? They were going out to kill the Gar, and he was telling the Gar, "You have to go away. You have to go away. You're gonna." And he was doing it in a tough love way because he had to absolutely get this Gar to go away before it was going to get killed.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's something that often happens in books and movies. The main character, because they have to be strong and noble, they have to be a dick to get the person they care about to go away from them in anger to protect them, which is so dumb.
This is like this book's mantra, or maybe even the series.
Yeah, basically.
Kaelin did it. It's like, let me be a dick to do the more noble thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kaelin was a dick. He was a dick. It's like, that's the go-to thing to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Be a dick. And we've seen it in other books too. Rand was a total dick for a long time in some of the books.
Yep. Definitely. He was a fucking annoying, arrogant bastard in so many of them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he even showed signs of it early on, right? Like, he was a dick to all his friends in the second book because he wanted to protect them,
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's not bad. I would say this is a fine book. It's not horrible.
Yeah, me too.
It's not. I'm not gonna shit all over Goodkind because of his personality and shit, but I think that this book is decent.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good, actually. Like, people like Daniel Green, for example, like, just think, oh, these books are awful, or I don't even know if he has actually read more than the first one, but I mean, the first one's okay. It's not terrible, and this one's way better than the first one.
Yeah, first one's okay. Like you said, not terrible. Like, the dialogue can still be wooden at times.
Yeah.
But that's just Terry Goodkind is, I don't know. That's just how he writes, I guess.
I think that dialogue is actually slightly better in this one too. It's not that great either, but it's better than like the so just ridiculously cheesy and tropey dialogue in the first one.
Yeah, I think it's just Richard that has the weird fucking dialogue. Like, everybody else seems like normal. Not normal, but at least like believable characters. Richard just always seems weird and wooden and maddening and stubborn.
Yeah.
But maybe he's just supposed to be like that way. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
So I gave it 3 out of 5, and you give it 4 out of 5. In actuality, I'd probably give it like a 3.5. It's
yeah, I was actually kind of thinking that myself too.
So I would say if you've read a lot of fantasy and you need something new to read, this is definitely something to check out. Like, it's not Sanderson good. It's not
No.
George R. Martin good, but there are some interesting aspects that I think are entertaining.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I guess we can quickly do what have you read? Because I haven't read too much, but I guess you can just go over some of the couple most interesting things that you read this past week or so.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I finished Last Argument of Kings today also. And
nice.
Oh man, I like that. Just like with the other two books in this series so far, I liked it even more in my reread than I did the first time, and I actually forgot so much of what happened in it. It's such a fucking great book.
Dude, it's super action. There's like, the pacing is ridiculous. There's so much stuff that happens in that last book.
Yeah, I know. You're like, holy shit, this is some fucking major shit that's happening. Oh, now more fucking incredibly major shit? And then that happens like 5 more times. Like, holy shit, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's super, super stuff. It's like, it moves so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got everything, like quick pacing, awesome action, excellent dialogue, excellent corruption, excellent dark humor, the fucking dark and sometimes dark humor of Glokta in his internal monologue, and like all the scheming of him and Baez to try to get Jezal elected as king, even though we find out that he was a bastard. And then there's like Logan 9, there's the Bloody Nine versus Fenris the Feared, and there's Baez fighting the Eaters, and there's that likely a war happening throughout the book. And Jezal is like finding out that, hey, guess what? If you're a noble and you're married to some chick who doesn't give a shit about you, she's gonna treat you like shit, and you're probably gonna end up treating her like shit too.
Yeah, one of the funniest lines in the book is when, like, Glokta checkmates her, and she's like, "Oh, what do I have to do?" And Glokta's like, "Fuck!" I laugh so hard. Like, yeah.
Exactly.
Because she's like a lesbian, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so awesome.
Such good stuff. Yeah,
yeah.
And, Glokta having to kill his friends, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's just like, man, as always, he's like he's such a great character. All the like the character development, even like it's not like these people are becoming better in any way, but the interesting things that happen with all of the characters in this book is just fascinating.
Yeah, well, Glokta becomes the, what do you call it? Like the puppet master. He's not the puppet master, but he basically,
like at the very end of the book, he becomes the arch and he at the very end of the book he becomes the arch inquisitor, and he's the one being controlled by Baez. Well, after Baez leaves, and then so he's basically obeying Baez's orders, and Jezal is going to, even though he really doesn't want to, because he stood up to him before, but he stood up to Baez before he left, and then he basically just used his magic powers to just make him feel unbelievable pain out of nowhere and get like throw up and shit like that. So he basically forced him into just being his own personal puppet ruler, right?
Yeah, well, to be honest, Jezal's head got super big.
That's true.
I thought, like, Baez is definitely ethically questionable, but I think that Jezal needed to be shown to be humbled. Like, his head was just getting too big.
Yeah, that's true. But Baez still went fucking overboard, though.
Yeah, but Baez has been controlling things for thousands of years, so He's basically telling Giselle that he is like a child in the span of time that he's been alive. It's basically he is dealing with children. That's what he's doing.
Basically the most powerful character in the First Law universe. He beats like literally everyone, even the other magi who get resurrected and all of the eaters.
Right, and we see some other characters transform, like Pharaoh transforms at the end of this.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
She becomes different.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like the ethical questions about, is Logan evil?
That's such an interesting question too.
Yeah, because like the dog man is like, even his own troops are like, oh yeah, that evil bastard, the Bloody Nine, and then the Black Dowls like calling him an evil bastard. Which I can see their perspective. Like, when he gets into his mode, anybody is up for grabs. Like, he killed the dude's kid. He killed the Thunderhead. It's like, Jesus. He almost killed the dog man.
Well, it's like it's almost like he's schizophrenic and he goes into fucking demon mode and he turns into like a fucking psychopath, like you see in movies. How, I don't know how actors do it, but they make them, when actors are playing serial killers, they make it look like their pupils go totally black and they look like there's not a person inside there. That's a fucking psychopathic murderous predator.
Yeah, and that is one of his personalities. I know Logan is trying to be a better man, but he cannot just completely get rid of his alternate personality when he's in the heat of battle. It's interesting. Like, I love Logan, but there's this dark side of him that's like, oh man, that's pretty horrible that you killed your friends and this kid.
Definitely.
But yeah, we'll discuss that in full at a later date, right? What was something else that you came across that was interesting that you read?
Well, I also finished. Actually, I just listened to today this book on Jeffrey Epstein, which I thought was really interesting, called Perversion of Justice, I loved it because it was the most detailed account I've come across so far about the whole Epstein story, because it was written by the original journalist who wrote the original 3-part story in the Miami Herald. That was how everyone found out about Jeffrey Epstein in the first place. And I really like it too because she goes like really into detail about the levels of corruption and all the powerful people he was involved with. So I like that a lot better than the documentary series I watched about it on Netflix, because that mainly focused on the victims and how hard it was for them. And that's like the most depressing aspect of it. And I'm more interested in the corruption and how the corruption of
how
power.
I was able to get away with that. For
exactly.
So long.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. There's multifacets of that. The victims, their stories, how he was able to get away from it, like all the different rich and powerful people that knew him.
Yeah.
And the backlash that's creating today, from what I understand, the whole Epstein thing is partially responsible for Bill Gates' divorce. Not sure how much of that is true, but it seems that it might be.
Well, he flew on his private jet and went to his island, I think, at least a few times. And then when asked about it, he said something like, when he found it was strictly business dealings, and when he found out that he didn't have the expertise that he said he did, they broke ties. But there's a lot of speculation about whether they, whether they were more friendly than that and they were actually friends or something. And then, one question comes up repeatedly in the book is, how did all of these powerful people know Jeffrey Epstein so well personally, but None of them apparently knew about his fucking pedophile pedophile prostitution pyramid scheme that he had going on for decades.
Well, from what I understand, Bill Gates met with them after he was in jail. After he got out of jail the first time, it's like at that point, everybody knows that this guy's a scumbag.
Right.
But they're still dealing with him, so that's pretty weird.
It definitely is, man. Like
corruption, man.
It's the clearest example of how, you know, money can corrupt people. Like money, and you know enough powerful people, apparently you can get away with almost anything.
Right. What's this book called again? I'm definitely interested.
It's called Perversion of Justice.
Perversion of Justice. Okay. I'll have to look into that, see if my libraries carry it.
Yeah, it's really good.
All right. Do you got one more you want to talk about?
Yeah, I've been reading this collection of essays by Arthur Schopenhauer, the famous, or depending on how you look at it, infamous pessimist. And it's kind of just an interesting collection of essays he wrote about. There's one about suicide. There's one about the metaphysics of love. There's one of his really misogynist, and there's his basically militant atheist, anti-religion perspective, and then he writes a variety of interesting subjects. And he wrote one about suicide too, and basically it's about how he's in favor of suicide. So that's interesting too, because I'm against suicide, but he actually makes a pretty interesting argument for it, I think.
Yeah. I'm not for it.
I'm not either.
Yeah.
I wrote a blog a long time ago on my blog called Don't Kill Yourself.
I think the only time I'd be for it if someone knows that they have a terminal illness, and they don't want to have to go through the worst of it.
Yeah.
But if someone's just like sad and depressed, I'm not for that.
Yeah. Yeah, like something like euthanasia is kind of a form of suicide depending on how you look at it, but it's different from like suicide in general, from like, you know, like if you and you get a doctor to just chemically cause you to die or something like that, that's a different thing from just shooting yourself because you're being bullied at school all the time or something like that, right?
Right. That's totally different.
Yeah.
As you know, you can't escape a terminal illness. If there's just a situation, you can definitely overcome a situation, but if it comes to like terminal illness and you know you're going to have a really shitty existence within the next few months, I'm okay with that. You know, it's better to go out to choose how to die. You know you're going to die soon. I think it's a good way to choose a more dignified way to go out if you want to choose a more dignified way to go out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's a difference when your fucking organs are failing, you're in and out of consciousness, you're in constant pain. You just have all your relatives just circling your bed and going through anguish as well, while you're going through this pain. So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting, moral and ethical question.
Yeah,
but
an interesting one that people have talked about for a long time too is that when Socrates killed himself when he was going to be executed for heresy for teaching the teaching the wrong ways of the wrong gods or something like that because he didn't believe in the right God. So he's charged with something like worshiping the wrong gods and corrupting the youth. So I think there was actually something though where he just kind of died based on pride because he could have went free if he had just like confessed and said that he's going to worship the right gods and stop influencing the children. But he was such a rebel that he decided to die for his principles. And because he knew he was going to be executed, he got someone to get him hemlock, which is poison. So he decided to poison himself instead of being executed. That's an interesting moral situation too. Yeah.
Okay. So as far as my reading, hasn't been a whole lot. I actually did finish, the Last Argument of Kings recently as well. We talked about that. Before I started that, I was in the middle of Chapter House Dune. I'm not finished with it. But
is that the 616 original one by Frank Herbert?
Yeah, it's another one with O'Drade and another goaler of Duncan, Idaho. That whole deal. And then we have like the honored matres who are like some super prostitutes
they got sex powers.
Yeah, who are now becoming like the power in the universe, I guess, or the galaxy. So there's kind of like a hunting down of these what the hell are they called? Bene Gesserit chapters. Right. And they're trying to control their genetics to try to gain some of the advantages of the honored matres. But I think we found in the book right preceding this one that there is one of the Bene Gesserit whose sex powers are actually more advanced than the honored matres, right?
Oh, right, I forgot about that. It was so long ago that I read the book 5.
So, I'm actually not very deep into that one. I think I'll revisit it after I'm done with the current book I'm reading, which is Sharp Ends. Have you read this one yet?
That sounds familiar. Is it a Gillian Flynn one?
No, it's Joe Abercrombie.
Oh, okay. I don't think I have read that one.
Oh, I need to send it to you.
You should send it to me, man. Is it the first one of those? Is it the one in his newer trilogy?
No, this one is actually it's a anthology of short stories in the First Law universe.
Oh, I might have read that actually. I'm not sure. So you have read it? You should send it to me either way, dude, because I really don't remember whether I've read it or not. It does sound familiar, but I'm not sure if I've read it.
Okay, I started it right. I was like itching for more First Law, so I went straight into Sharp Ends, which chronologically, I think it was written after Red Country.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of the short stories cover all the time periods in between, even before the first Law book, and then there are stories that take place during Red Country. So I think the very first story is like young Glocta.
Oh, dude, that's cool. Dude, I was just thinking earlier today, man, it would be so awesome if Joe Abercrombie wrote like a novella that's about the backstory of Glocta.
Yeah, so very first one is young Glocta in the battle as an officer in the army.
Okay.
And then we got a younger version of Column West in that story. There's actually quite a few different stories. So we got young Glocta, we got some Bremer Dan Gorst stories. There's an interesting story that starts with a young, what the hell is his name? Severod. So this was before he became a practical, but he is not the main character in the story. It's like some other character named Shev who
okay.
there's actually, I think, 3 or 4 short stories about this character, and they're actually my
Chev?
favorite. Yeah,
Okay.
and they're my favorite stories in this anthology. Are the stories with Shev in it. You'll see once you get these. They're really fun.
Okay, cool.
But
So who's Chev? Without spoilers.
Shev is the very first. I'll just tell you about a little bit about the very first story. So Shev is a retired thief who basically wants to settle down. So she opens up like this little shop, a smoke shop that Severod also works at.
Okay.
And then there's something that happens here that makes her become an adventurer. And I'll send you the books. Her stories are really funny and interesting. And
Sweet.
she crosses paths with a lot of different characters that you're familiar with. So,
that's cool. Like that's one thing I was noticing more. I don't remember whether you and I talked about this. I think we might have that. I was paying more because I've read the standalone novels. I was paying more attention to the secondary characters that I know are in some of the standalone novels. When I was reading the first Law trilogy this time, like Casca and Calder and Shivers.
yeah, Calder, Shivers, Casca, and these become like prominent characters, later on in the one-offs, right? So,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, in the Sharp Ends book, there's a lot of those characters are back. So, but they're not the main focuses. Like they might be ancillary characters and part of another character's story.
That's pretty cool.
But yeah, I'm a little bit more than halfway in this. But yeah, the Chev stories are really fun. I think you'll like them. And the anthology is chronological, so all the stories are in chronological order. So you have like the younger Glokta, the younger Severod, and then you have some other concurrent characters through the Chev stories. You get the story about Shy, if you remember her from Red Country, and
she's like the kind of the main character who we find out is Logan takes care of.
Yeah, she is the one searching for her siblings that were captured, but if you remember from Red Country, she kind of has some dark past that's alluded to.
Right.
You get to see some of that in the short story, like what was her previous life like.
That's pretty cool.
And there's like short stories from the Heroes era. There's short stories from Best Served Cold era, and those characters like Mercato is, like I'm saying, like Chev crosses paths with a lot of these other characters from the short stories from the standalone. So you'll get to see these characters again. So I'll send you Sharp Ends. I thought you had read it before, but I guess you hadn't. But I'll send it if you think you have.
The title sounded title sounded familiar, but none of those stories sound familiar, so I don't think I have.
Okay. So yeah, I'll send it to you because I was like itching from our first law after the last argument of the Kings, and I was like, okay, I haven't done Sharp Ends yet, and I know that came after Red Country, so let's check that out.
Sweet.
And yeah, so I'll get that to you, and that's basically all I read. Just some First Law stuff and a little bit of Dune.
Cool.
Haven't done any. Have not read any nonfiction lately. I've been substituting podcasts for nonfiction recently because sometimes I'll favor podcasts and then I'll do my fiction, or I'll read some nonfiction and fiction. But mostly I've been listening to podcasts to get my fill of nonfiction content, so to speak.
Have you been reading more of Path of Daggers?
Yeah. I think I'm on chapter 27 now, so I only got 2 more chapters left. And then I'll have to listen to it, and then we can finish up this book finally. But yeah, I've read some more Path of Daggers. So I was like, oh yeah, I remember this stuff. I remember them trying to find the Black Ajah and trying to force them to use the Oath Rod and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm almost done. I just got 2 more chapters left. But I guess the next time we talk, we'll be doing Castlevania, right? So that will be next up. I'm going to try to finish Path of Daggers so that becomes something that we'll do soon. But you know me, when it comes to physical reading, it just takes me forever. I don't know. I get through audio so much more quicker and efficiently. But next time we meet, which may be next week, depending on the crazy stuff that may be happening with your schedule. Because I know there's a possibility of us doing your podcast Saturday and Sunday, depending on how things go, right?
Yeah, it's up to you, man. We can talk with Tristram and on Saturday or Sunday, and I can do my other podcast that I'm going to do with Jared from Wisecrack about postmodernism and critical race theory, and James Lindsay and the IDW on. Yeah, that'll be fun. What I want to do eventually, actually, is I want to talk just with him first, because I haven't talked to him at all before, and then do that critical race theory episode the next week with you and Peter Salmon, because he seems to be more well read on the subject, and he's definitely super against James Lindsay's depiction or explanation.
So is Jared pro Lindsay?
Well, I would say he's fairly pro Lindsay, yeah. And but in us talking about it, it sounds like we kind of have some interesting areas of agreement and disagreement. And like I was telling you that I was commenting on one of his videos, and at first I kind of got the impression that he was like being dismissive and thought I was like some random YouTube bro or something. And then he said, "No, I respect you, man. You made some really detailed criticisms." And then I asked if he wanted to talk about it more, and he said that he would. So that'll be really interesting. And especially like I was alluding to there, I think it would be really interesting to do a chat about postmodernism and critical race theory with all 4 of us at some point too, because that could be an interesting combination of perspectives. And I get the sense that all 4 of us are mature enough to have like a balanced and reasonable conversation without yelling at each other about disagreeing about things.
Yeah. Like I remember talking to James Lindsay. I remember trying to get him a gotcha on I was trying to gotcha him about Jordan Peterson's view of postmodernism. And no, it wasn't Jordan Peterson's. It was what's his name? The objectivist.
Stephen Hicks.
And I think that was before like Lindsay became super radically anti-woke.
Yeah.
Because I understand his what he's trying to do, but it seems like he's gone so anti-woke that he's become ideological about it.
Yeah, well, like especially that video, I just watched that earlier before we started. By the way, that video that you and I watched, that Vosh made criticizing what James Lindsay said on PragerU about critical race theory, which like this is reminding me of postmodernism more and more, because I have read one technical academic book on critical race theory so far, the one that you've read, and it already sounds like half of what he says is bullshit about it. Like, what the fuck is this shit, man? Like, public intellectuals are not telling you the full. They're at least not telling you the full truth of these academic movements that they talk about all the time. Like, you need to read this shit yourself.
Is that they're ideologically politicizing it and not really objectively just taking a look at it without injecting some type of like personal moral philosophy. Like, that's like basically what's going to happen. It's
like like it originally, in its original form, as we've talked about before, and you know, it's kind of branched off in several different directions now, but in its original form, and this is still one of the main forms that its critical race theory is still practiced in today, is just like trying to address racial disparities in the criminal justice system between people. Like, it's not like, that's basically what it was supposed to be in the first place, and what a lot of it mostly is today too. It's like, okay, so there's a disproportionate amount of black people in prison. Yes, there are a lot of reasons that go into this, but let's try to solve this problem. There's nothing wrong with that itself at all. And most of it is not all of this, like, we're going to teach children to hate America and that all white people are always racist in every interaction, bro.
Yeah, it's just, well, it's just kind of what happens when you politicize something. Often it's instilling fear based off of a lack of knowledge. That's what fear is, right? You have a lack of knowledge of something, and your first reaction is to fear it without being educated about it.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can be educated about things and then develop a fear. You know, that definitely does happen. Like, like Fukushima, it's no big deal. And then you really look into it, it's like, oh, there's like fucking radioactive shit being spewed in the ocean. So once you're educated more about it, you're like, oh, you have to be wary of the types of things that you allow to happen to our environment. It's not like you could have prevented you could have prevented Fukushima, but that's not something that is easily preventable because it's a goddamn force of nature that happened. It's like, what are you going to do? You're not going to stop an earthquake from happening.
But what you're going to do is go back in time and not put a nuclear power plant right next to the sea.
Yeah, that's kind of like a bad. I don't see that as a really good thing to do. Any water source, but unfortunately, nuclear power plants require tons of water, which is why you often see them by huge, like big water sources or bodies of water or rivers.
I didn't think of that, but yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, there are some reactors that require it. I think it depends on how you build the reactor. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, that would be really interesting. I am looking forward to your discussion with Jared. That ought to be really interesting. And hopefully I'm free to actually listen to it live so I can comment. Because a lot of times I'm not able to because I might be busy doing something. But if I have comments and stuff, I'll actually comment on the video instead of sending you DMs about it this time.
That'd be cool.
So that other people can interact with like my observations and stuff. I probably should just take all those DMs I did and just post them as comments on your thing so people can interact
that'd
on
be
your
cool.
YouTube video.
But go ahead, man.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to your talk with Peter. But yeah, if we could arrange something where we all talk about this stuff. I'm not super freaking like educated on critical race theory. I just
No,
happen
me
to
neither.
be adjacent to some of these issues that are happening. Like the whole crazy shit about it being in schools kind of originates in my backyard over here. So I can talk a little bit about that. And what
Hmm.
I've read doesn't seem like I understand anything can be taken to an extreme, but and we have people that do those types of
Yeah, like
things.
that's like people. The problem is that some people have done that, like Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility that we did a chat on your channel about, for example, that basically just made people think this is what critical race theory is, which I thought until you started reading, like researching the actual
Yeah,
text about this too, and like, oh,
yeah,
so
like oh,
this
black
piece,
people can't be racist. And then I
yeah,
read the critical race theories book and like, oh no, everybody's racist. Like,
yeah.
oh, that's completely contrary to what these crazy wokesters are saying.
Yeah. I mean, if I remember correctly, in that book that we both read about critical race theory, they even have like a few examples, like those that Thomas Sowell have used about black people being racist against Spanish people, or Spanish people being racist against Asian people, or different types of
Right.
black people being racist against each other.
They definitely talk about other races that aren't white being racist against other races that aren't white. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of ridiculous. This whole power plus privilege thing. It's not a critical race theory thing. It's
Yeah, that's
something
a woke
else.
thing.
It probably comes from one of these other. I don't know. I don't know too much about the other critical theories, like your crazy gender theories and queer theories and all of that. I don't know if this originates in one of those, but it's definitely not in CRT, which
Yeah.
is where people are saying, "Oh, it's going to teach you to hate white people and power plus privilege and blah blah blah." Yeah, none of that's a part of it. I'm sorry, but you guys are being misinformed here.
Yeah. And then people run like people who support these causes run with them with well also not researching them, like uber lefties go along with like white fragility without researching it either, and then that adds more fuel to the fire for like people who are super against CRT being like, see, it's all these fucking woke purple-haired people screaming about oppression. That's what CRT is.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I had to read the shit to see what the fuck people are talking about and whether what they're talking about is actually true. And
Yeah.
yeah, of course, I was proven right that they weren't really being honest about what was being really talked about.
This
But
is
anyway,
one of the most important lessons that I think we both learned. I definitely learned from mixed mental arts that I try to forward more in my channel, and I know you do too. Which is that public intellectuals often misinform you and oversimplify things.
yeah, yeah, they're not going to be. They're going to have biases. That's basically what you need to know. And
Yeah,
they will
they're just
play
as
to
human
those
as everyone
biases.
else. Yeah.
Yeah. So if they have a political persuasion that they adhere to, they're going to use these biases to interpret some of these things. So that's
Hmm.
just it's inescapable. It's going to happen. You just have to investigate it for yourself sometimes. It really depends on who it is that you're looking into, whether you can tell they're being ideological or not. But it's just something you got to investigate on your own. You know, you can't always take people's word for it, especially on cultural hot button issues.
Yeah.
That's when you got to read widely and check out both sides of the equation. Like I checked out. I was getting a lot of the right wing version of what CRT was, and
Yeah,
I
me too.
wasn't getting adequate definitions from the left. So I kind of had to like go and see what it was, and that's when I went and checked it out.
Yeah, that's the problem, man. People, like you said, people politicizing this shit. So, like I was saying earlier, even the lefties don't accurately represent what they're talking about either.
Yeah, because the power plus privilege shit, that's complete bullshit. And the oh yeah, we want all white people to feel guilty. Also complete bullshit. So
Yeah,
I just had to. There's just somewhere in the middle there. There's definitely things about CRT that I don't agree with, and there's
yeah, me
definitely
too.
some things about CRT that seem perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, we can go ahead and finish it up here. Did you have any plugs that you wanted to get out there?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned most of them already. Check out those upcoming podcasts, like the one with Jared from Wisecrack and with Derrida biography author Peter Salmon, who I've talked with a few times about postmodern. Both of those will pretty much be about postmodernism and CRT and public intellectuals. And you were going to talk with me with Peter Salmon when we talk, and those will be on Mindgasms, of course. And
Right.
yeah, and check out other upcoming ones that I have too. Not sure if I. Oh yeah, I mentioned Chris and I. I'm not sure when exactly yet, but we're gonna do a kind of another political chat about the different federal candidates and their party platforms for the upcoming Canadian federal election. No, less people will be interested in that because most people don't care about Canadian politics. But you're doing that too. And yeah, we were talking about how we're probably going to do another COVID chat with you and Chris and talk about more of the nuanced points between what different doctors are saying about COVID. And yeah, so check out Mindgasms on YouTube and check out my blog too if you're interested. Like I said, I wrote a blog about suicide a long time ago. I write lots about World War II and all kinds of other topics that we've talked about at mindgasms.bplifetime.com, and I publish chapters of my novel and short stories on poems on there too. And check out Mindgasms on Patreon if you want to give me money too, which is always awesome. And yeah, you can check me out on social media too. I think Dusty has my Twitter there, and I'm Andrew Mindgasms on Instagram and Andrew Meinzer on Facebook. And yeah, that's all my stuff there.
All right. Well, check us out next week. Well, we may do Castlevania, or we may do something on Andrew's channel. Whatever it is, we'll be doing something. And in order to find out if we're doing something, go ahead and click on that bell, and that'll let you know when we're going to go live, and it'll keep you up to date when we post content to YouTube.
Yeah.
So
better to subscribe to both of our channels because
basically
we're on each other's channels like all the time.
Yeah, basically subscribe to both channels if you want to hear all of our content. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and like and subscribe, share. I was looking at reviews and talks about this book on YouTube, and there's like hardly any. I believe this is probably the longest discussion of this particular book that there is on YouTube, because the longest review I found was like 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so I know it wasn't super in depth, and we got a lot off topic, but if, most of the meat and potatoes was about the Stone of Tears, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. And we will be doing the third book in the future. I'm not sure how soon. Yeah, Blood of the Fold, but we will be doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I recommend this series for people who haven't read it. If you're if you like fantasy books, like I said, this second one especially is way better than I expected it to be.
Yeah, it was. I was surprised. I was expecting a book not as good as the first. Not that the first is a terribly awesome book, but I was expecting something not as good, and I was very surprised that it was actually quite quite a deal better than the first book.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Have a great evening, good day, wherever you are, and join us next week for our next chat.
Adios until next time, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye. Press the button too much.